The end of September. Charleston Harbor still warm at 9 in the evening. Easterbrook and Company's wharf strung with lights for the autumn gala. Owen Trask was finishing a winch repair at the next slip 8 months on the yard, work jacket damp at the collar. A guest's voice carried across the dock, something about Marlowe getting any man she wanted. Then she was walking past him. She stopped. Owen said it before he could stop himself. "Whoever ends up with you's gonna be a lucky guy," Marlowe answered, almost too quiet to hear. "Was hoping that would be you. If this opening pulled you in, drop the word stay in the comments before we go on." 6:30 in the morning. Fog sat low over the slips, and the wood of the dock was still wet from the night. Owen walked the long way around the gala wreckage. The crew had not taken down the lights yet, and went straight to the workshed. Calder Voss looked up from the coffee pot. He was the only one who held Owen's eyes a beat longer than usual. He said nothing. He poured a second cup and pushed it across the bench. By 7, Owen was home. The kitchen of his small woodhouse in Mount Pleasant smelled of toast and the salt that came in off the marsh. His daughter Hattie sat at the table in her school uniform, drawing a boat on the back of an envelope. The boat had a square sail, which was wrong for the hull she had drawn. "You came back late," she said. "Finished a winch." "Just a winch?" "Just a winch." She accepted that. She turned the pencil and added a flag to the mast. On the 14th floor of the Easterbrook office tower, Marlowe stood at the window with a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The harbor below was the color of zinc. Her chief of staff, Adler Quinn, knocked once and entered. He had a tablet under his arm and a careful face. "Royce filed the Marquardt agenda this morning," he said. "Special shareholder meeting in 2 weeks." She nodded. "Marlowe, I heard you." He waited. She did not turn. After a moment, he set the tablet on her desk and left. She did not look at the tablet. She looked at the photograph on the credenza, her father at the helm of Halcyon, 12 years ago, her own younger self beside him squinting against the sun. At noon, she came down to the yard. No appointment. The workshed door was open, and Owen was crouched beside a keel, sanding a join. She stopped 3 meters away. He felt her before he saw her. He stood. "Repair list for the Bermuda tender," she said. "I would like it by Friday. You will have it Thursday." She nodded. She did not move. "Anything else, Miss Easterbrook?" She looked at him. He looked at her. The yard around them, the gulls, the slap of a halyard, the low growl of a generator did not pause. "No," she said. "That is all." She turned to go. He let her get 4 steps before he said it. "I should not have said what I said last night." She did not turn around. "You think I would have answered if you had not?" She kept walking. He stood with the sandpaper in his hand for a long minute after she was gone. Then he sat down on the keel and put his head in his hands, not because he was hurt, because he was not, and he could not understand why. At the end of the day, he stood at the edge of the dock and watched the tide pull out. Calder came up beside him with 2 open bottles of beer and put one in his hand without asking. "You wanted to say it," Calder said. "I did not want to say it last night. There is not a right night for that kind of thing." They drank without speaking until the lights came on across the harbor. The next morning, Marlowe stayed in her office past the usual hour. She had a stack of brief memos on the desk and she read none of them. She stood and walked to the photograph and lifted it down from the credenza and put it flat on the desk. Halcyon. Hull line that her father had said was the most beautiful one he had ever signed off on. He had said it at the launch in 2014. She had been 22 and standing beside him with her hand on his arm, and she had asked who designed her. He had said, "The boy is too young to ruin with attention." Marlowe had laughed. Her father had not. Adler came in with the morning agenda. He glanced at the photograph on the desk. He glanced at her. "Trask at the yard," he said, as if it had just occurred to him. Calder mentioned he used to work in the Boston Design subsidiary. Marlowe did not look up. "How long ago?" 12 years, give or take." Calder did not want to say more than that. She thanked him. She waited until he was gone. Then she put her hand flat on the photograph and held it there as if to keep something from rising out of it. By midday she was at the yard. She walked past the workshed without stopping and found Owen in the storage building behind the slipways, where they kept the older hulls the company had built for itself. The doors were rolled open. He was crouched beside the keel of an unfinished hull. She did not wait for him to stand. "You designed Halcyon." He did not stand. He set his hand flat on the floor and rose slowly. "I designed Halcyon." The light came in from the open door in a long slant. Dust hung in it. Outside, the gulls called and were answered. "My father chose you when you were 27. He did. He told me he could not name you because attention would ruin you. He told me the same thing about silence." She sat down on a coil of cordage, as if her legs had decided for her. She did not cry. She held herself very still, the way a person does when a wave has come up unexpectedly, and they are deciding whether to brace or let it pass through. You were going to lead the design division. I was going to. What happened? He did not say Diana's name. He said, my wife was sick. We came home. She lived 18 months. After she was gone, I went into the studio and looked at my drafting table and knew I would hate the next line I drew. So I did not draw it. Marlowe was quiet for a long time. Why did you come back here? Because Halcyon is in this building. Because the harbor is where Hattie grew up. Because Calder needed a carpenter, and I needed work, and there was nowhere else I was willing to be. She nodded. She stood. She did not touch him. She walked to the open doorway and stopped with her hand on the doorframe. You should have let him say your name. He understood why I asked him not to. I know he did, she said. He always did. She left. Owen stood in the slant of light and did not move for a long time. 3 floors up in his private office, Roy Stannard opened the locked drawer of his desk and took out a sealed envelope marked Easterbrook Codicil Trust, 2014. He looked at it. He put it back. He picked up his phone. Move the meeting up, he said. 2 weeks is too long. Owen came home that night, and Hattie was at the kitchen table again, drawing. She had drawn the square sailboat again, but this time she had added a smaller boat beside it with a triangular sail. That is correct rigging, he said. I know, she said. I went to the library. He kissed the top of her head and sat down across from her. Dad? Yes. Tomorrow are you going to work early? Yes. She colored in the smaller boat. Is she pretty? He set the salt shaker down very carefully. Hot tea. You do not have to tell me. She did not look up. She finished the sail and started on the waterline. Owen watched her for a long time and did not know what to do with the part of himself that had just been seen by his daughter. The next morning, Marlowe sent him an email through the company portal. It was 3 sentences. A client in Bermuda had commissioned a 38-foot tender custom build. She wanted to discuss the design parameters. Could he come up to the office at 2? He came up at 2. Her office was on the 14th floor, full of gray light off the water. She closed the door behind him. She did not sit at the desk. She sat in one of the 2 chairs by the window and gestured to the other. I am not the carpenter for that build, he said. I know. Then why am I here? She did not answer right away. She set a folder on the small table between them and did not open it. This is not a request to be the carpenter on a tender, Owen. This is me asking if you want to come back. He sat down because his knees told him to. I am not coming back. Why? He looked at the harbor through the window. A pilot boat was crossing toward the cruise terminal. He had not said any of this out loud to anyone except Calder, and Calder had not asked questions. For 8 months at the end, Diana was in a bedroom I had painted ocean blue because she said she wanted to feel like she was already in the water. I did not draw a single line for those 8 months. After she died, I went into the studio and looked at my table, and I knew if I drew the next line I would hate it. So I have not drawn one in 4 years. If I draw one now, I will know whether I hate it, and I am not ready to know that. Marlowe sat very still. Thank you for telling me, she said. She did not try to talk him out of it. She did not lean forward. She put her hands flat on her knees and looked at him with a kindness that did not ask anything of him. There was a knock at the door. Adler opened it before she could say, "Come in." "Sorry," he said. "Mr. Trask, your daughter's teacher, tried to reach you. Your phone is off." Owen stood up. Behind Adler, in the reception area, Hattie was standing very small beside a young woman in a school cardigan. Hattie had her backpack on and was holding a folded permission slip in both hands. Marlowe walked out before he did. She crossed the lobby and crouched down so she was eye level with Hattie and held out her hand. "I am Marlowe," she said. "Your father has fixed boats for my family since before you were born." Hattie took her hand. "I am Hattie." "I know." The teacher said something about an after-school program and a missed pickup. Owen heard it and did not hear it. He stood in the doorway and watched his daughter take a stranger's hand without looking at him first. The tropical storm shifted direction in the afternoon. The National Weather Service moved the cone over Charleston by 6 in the evening. By 8, the marine forecast was a band of red, with gusts to 45 knots expected after 2,200 hours. 63 hulls were moored in Easterbrook slips. Calder put out a crew call. Owen stayed. He sent Hattie to the neighbor. He worked through the early evening with the dockhands they could reach, securing tarps, doubling lines, hauling tenders up the ramps. By 7:30 the rain started. By 8 the wind was on them. At 19:45, The beam of a headlight swept across the boatyard and stopped beside the work shed. Marlo got out of the car in foul-weather gear, boots, a headlamp around her neck. She did not announce herself. She walked straight to the bow of a 38-footer and started taking up the slack on the spring line. Calder looked at Owen across the deck. Owen did not say anything. He went back to work. For 3 hours she worked beside them. She knew the knots. She knew which hulls needed bumpers doubled and which needed an extra stern line aft. She had done this beside her father from the time she was 9, and her hands remembered before her mind did. She did not speak to Owen except to call out boat numbers and instructions. He did not speak to her except to confirm. Once, across the deck of a sloop, in the rain that had become horizontal, they looked at each other through the dark in the water, and neither of them looked away for the count of 3. Then she called the next boat number, and they moved on. At 1 in the morning, the wind dropped. The eye was not over them. The storm had veered north of the cone after all. The yard was intact. The crew sat in the big shed with hot coffee. Marlo sat on a bench beside Owen. Her hair was wet against her neck. Her chest was still rising and falling from the work. Neither of them said the line from the gala. Neither of them needed to. When she fell asleep against the cinder block wall, Calder draped a tarp blanket over her shoulders. Owen watched him do it. Calder met his eyes once and went back to drying his hands. By morning, the harbor was glass. That afternoon, the Charleston Business Journal ran a short item on its website. 6 paragraphs. Careful language. It noted that the CEO of Easterbrook and Company had been seen in unusual proximity to a yard employee in recent weeks, and that some board members were raising concerns about the appearance of personal involvement during a sensitive sale evaluation. It did not name Owen. It quoted an unnamed source. Marlo read it in the car on the way back to the office. Her jaw set. She did not respond. She called Owen from her desk at 3. "Did you see the article?" "I saw it. If you want to step back, I will not hold it against you. I will not even ask you to explain." There was a long silence. "No." "Owen." I said no, Marlo. She closed her eyes. She held the phone to her ear and listened to him breathe and did not say anything for a long moment. "Thank you," she said. She hung up. Across town in his office, Royce read the article on his computer screen and allowed himself, for the first time in 2 years, a small, precise smile. 2 days later, Owen submitted his counter-proposal to the Bermuda Tender Commission. He proposed instead a full restoration of Halcyon, the hull she had sailed with her father. The hull he had drawn at 27, the hull that had been sitting under a tarp in the storage building behind the slipways for 12 years. Marlo approved it without comment. Calder took him into the storage building and pulled back the tarp. The paint on the hull had gone silvery in the dark. The bright work was dull. The hull line was still perfect. Owen stood beside her for a long time with his hand on the rail. Hattie came down on the weekend. School holiday. She climbed onto the deck before Owen could lift her up, sat at the bow with her legs dangling over the side. "Dad." "Yes." "Did you really draw this?" "I drew this." "Who was it for?" "For Marlo's family." Hattie touched the rail. She did not ask another question. Marlo arrived in the afternoon. She wore jeans, a sweater, no makeup. She did not look like a CEO. She climbed up onto the deck without asking and sat beside Hattie at the bow. Below the deck, Owen worked on a stringer and could hear them. "You do not have a mom, do you?" Hattie said after a while. Marlo was quiet. "How do you know that?" "Because you do not ask me about mine. People with moms always ask." Marlo looked out over the harbor. "My mom died when I was your age." Hattie's small voice. "Do you miss her?" "Every day. But I do not feel sad anymore. I just remember her." Hattie nodded slowly, the way a person does who has just been told something true that they already half knew. "Me too," she said. Below the deck, Owen sat back on his heels and rested his forearm across his knee. He did not breathe loudly. He kept his hands very still. At the end of the day, Marlo walked Hattie back to Owen's pickup and waited beside her until Owen came out. She did not say goodbye. She just touched Hattie's shoulder and walked to her car. That evening, Royce was waiting in the parking deck when Marlo came down from the office. He stood beside her car, hands in his coat pockets. "Vote with us, Marlo." "No." "Then there is something about your father I will make public." She unlocked her car. "Royce, you do not have anything about my father I do not already know." He smiled. He had the smile of a man who had been holding a card for a very long time and was about to play it. "That is because he kept something from you." "I will not." He walked away across the deck. His footsteps echoed off the concrete pillars. Marlo stood beside her car with her hand on the door handle. She She did not get in for a long time. Monday morning, Calder asked Marlowe to come to the file room behind the work shed. He locked the door behind her. He opened the old steel safe in the corner and took out a manila envelope that had been in there for 2 years. "Your father gave me this 6 months before he died," he said. "He told me to give it to you when you were ready to look at it without flinching. I have waited 2 years. I am not waiting any longer." She opened the envelope at the workbench. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a copy of a codicil to her father's will, dated 2014, executed before 2 witnesses. It assigned 8% of his personal Easterbrook shares to a private trust, with voting rights vested in a single named beneficiary until 2030. The beneficiary was Owen Trask. The second document was a letter in her father's handwriting. She read it standing. He had written that he knew the board would push for a sale after he was gone. He had written that he had chosen Owen because Owen had once turned down $1 million from him to keep the quality of a single weld on a hull. He had written that he needed Marlowe to have someone beside her who would not sell Heritage for any price, and that he could think of no one else. He had written that he had not told her in life because he did not want her to inherit a command. He wanted her to find her way to the answer herself. He had written at the end, "If you are reading this, Calder believed you were ready. He has never been wrong about anyone." She folded the letter. She did not cry. She put both documents back in the envelope and looked at Calder. Royce knew about this. Royce was the trustee of the estate. He was the one who was supposed to notify Owen. He never did. She nodded once. She left the file room with the envelope under her arm. She drove out of the yard and across the Ravenel Bridge and through the city until she reached Magnolia Cemetery. She parked. She walked under the live oaks to her father's stone and sat down on the grass beside it. She did not say much. "You should have told me." The wind moved in the oaks. A heron stood in the marsh at the edge of the cemetery. She stayed for an hour. She did not hear Owen until he was already sitting down on the other side of the stone. He did not look surprised to see her. She did not look surprised to see him. "You come here," she said, "once a month, since he died." "For how long today?" "I just got here," she nodded. They sat on either side of the stone and looked out at the marsh. After a while, Owen said, "He did not tell you because he knew you would not listen until you needed to. You knew him better than I did. I knew one side of him you do not have. You know 4 sides of him I do not." She did not answer. The sun moved a fraction lower over the oaks. A car door closed somewhere far away. Neither of them got up. When the light started to go, they stood at the same time. They walked back to the parking area along the gravel path together without speaking. They got into separate cars. She raised her hand from the wheel as she pulled past him. He raised his. That night, Owen sat beside Hattie's bed for a long time after she had fallen asleep. The room was dim. The window was open and the marsh was quiet. He had not spoken to Diana in his head in a long time. It had stopped being a thing he could do. Sometime in the 2nd year after, he found himself doing it now. He did not ask for permission. He said, "I think I am going to start drawing again." And then he said, "I think it is going to be all right." He sat there for another half hour. Then he went to the kitchen and made coffee and stayed up until the sky started to gray. He was at the yard by 6. Calder was already there. "I will take the trust voting," Owen said. Calder looked at him over the rim of his coffee cup. "For Henry. For the 240 people on this yard. Because she should not have to stand alone. Not for her. That too. But not only." Calder nodded. He set the coffee down. He held out his hand. Owen took it. By Tuesday, Marlowe had the trust voting paperwork executed. She and Owen sat at her conference table with a list of 11 shareholders, of whom 7 might be persuadable. They had 3 days until the special meeting. They spent the next 3 days in meetings. Marlowe brought the financials. Owen brought the design vision he had not allowed himself to articulate in 4 years, a heritage yard, with a reopened design division producing a premium line under the Easterbrook name, 240 jobs preserved, 18 new ones created over 36 months. He spoke about boats the way he had once spoken about them at 27. He spoke without flinching. By Thursday evening, they had commitments from 5 of the 7. 2 were holdouts. Thursday night, Hattie was on the office sofa under Marlowe's coat. Owen had brought her because school was on a teacher workday, and the neighbor was at her sister's in Savannah. Marlowe had laid the coat over her at some point without a word. At 10:30, Marlowe stood up from the conference table to stretch. Owen stood too. They ended up on the same side of the table, in the half-light, with Hattie sleeping 10 feet away. He reached up and moved a piece of hair off her face. He stopped with his hand still close to her cheek. She did not move. For a long count of seconds, neither of them did anything. He could have closed the distance. She could have lifted her chin. Neither did. Marlowe. Owen, not yet. I know. He stepped back. She stepped back. He sat down on the far side of the table. She sat down across from him. They did not speak for a minute. Then they went back to the holdout list. It was the closest either of them had come to choosing easy over right, and they had chosen right. They both knew it without saying it. Late that night, after Owen had carried Hattie out and Marlowe had locked the office behind them, she sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Her family lawyer had been working through the older estate emails. He had forwarded one that morning. It was from Royce to the estate's outside counsel, dated 4 months after her father's death. It read, "Do not notify beneficiary of trust until I confirm. Confirmation may not come." She read it 3 times. She forwarded it to her own attorney with a single line, "File Friday morning before the meeting." She closed the laptop. Friday morning. The 15th floor conference room at Easterbrook headquarters. 11 shareholders seated around the long table. The board observed from the wall. Royce Stannard chaired. He opened with the Marquardt presentation. $1.4 billion for 60% of the yard and full design rights. The numbers were generous on paper. He included a slide near the end that referenced the Business Journal article without naming it, directly implication that the CEO's judgment was compromised by personal entanglement. He paused on that slide a beat longer than necessary. Marlowe stood. She was not theatrical. She walked to the head of the room and placed 3 documents on the small projector cart. She read the codicil aloud. She read the letter from her father aloud. Her voice did not break. Then she put the 3rd document on the projector. It was Royce's email to outside counsel, 4 years old now, instructing them to suppress notification of a trust beneficiary. The room went still. An older shareholder named Pemberton Gray Hair, lifelong family friend, leaned forward. "Royce, tell me this is not what it looks like." Royce did not say anything. Pemberton looked at the table. He looked at Marlowe. He sat back. Owen stood up from his seat at the far end of the room. He did not raise his voice. He did not start with anger. He laid out the alternative plan he had built with Marlowe over the previous 3 days the heritage yard preserved. The design division reopened under the Easterbrook name. 240 jobs intact, 18 new positions over 36 months, was projected revenue from the premium line within 5 years. He spoke for 9 minutes. He spoke about boats the way a man speaks about something he has been quiet about for too long. He finished by saying, "Henry trusted me not to sell this. I am not going to sell it. Miss Easterbrook should not have to stand alone any longer. That is all I have." He sat down. The vote was called by shares. Marlowe's 31%. Owen's 8% trust. Pemberton's 12%. 3 more shareholders voted with them. The total against the Marquardt bid came to 62%. The motion failed. Pemberton, as senior shareholder, made the second motion, that Royce Stannard be removed as chairman of the board immediately, pending civil action by the Easterbrook estate for breach of fiduciary duty. The vote was unanimous, excluding Royce. Royce stood. He gathered his papers. He did not look at anyone. He walked out of the room. He stopped at the elevator bank. A reporter from the Post and Courier was calling his cell phone for confirmation. He let it ring. The elevator doors opened and he stepped in. He had spent 30 years building leverage in this company and in this city, and for the first time in his adult life he could think of nothing to say back. In the conference room, Marlowe and Owen did not look at each other immediately. Marlowe thanked the shareholders for their time. Pemberton came over to her and put his hand on her arm and said, "Your father would have been proud of how you did that." She nodded and said, "Thank you. Henry would have liked you saying so." When the room had emptied, she and Owen were left at the long table. They sat for a moment in the silence. Outside the window, the harbor was full of light. She said, "We should get out of this room." He stood. Yes. They walked out together. That evening they ate at Owen's house in Mount Pleasant. Marlowe brought an apple pie she had made at her own kitchen that afternoon, between meetings with her attorney. The crust had burned slightly at the edges. Hattie ate 2 slices without commenting on it. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and the salt that came in off the marsh. Hattie talked about school. The 3rd grade class was studying the estuary, and the teacher had told them about the species of fish that lived in Charleston Harbor. Marlowe named 4 of them correctly, including the redfish that her father had taught her to identify when she was Hattie's age. Hattie looked at her with quiet wonder. After the dishes, Hattie went off to brush her teeth on her own. She did not have to be reminded. Owen watched her go down the hall and stood with a dish towel in his hand for a moment longer than he needed to. "What?" Marlowe said. "She used to need to be told to brush." "How long since?" "Tonight is the first time." Marlowe did not say anything to that. She picked up the dish towel and started drying. After Hattie was in bed, they went out to the back porch. The marsh was almost dark. The far lights of a dock blinked on the other side of the creek. They stood at the porch rail without speaking for a long time. "The night of the gala," Marlowe said. "I did not plan to say what I said. I did not know I was going to say it until it was already out of my mouth." Owen kept looking at the marsh. "I had been saying it in my head for 6 months," he said. "Every time I saw you walk down to the dock, I never said it out loud once." "Why not?" "I did not think I had the right." "You always had the right." He turned to look at her then. The porch light was low. Her face was in half shadow. "What now?" She did not answer immediately. She let the question sit in the air for a moment. Then she reached for his hand. Not his fingertips, his whole hand. He took hers. Neither of them squeezed. They just held. They did not kiss. They stood on the back porch of his woodhouse and held hands and watched the marsh and did not need anything more for that night. After a while, Marlowe said, "I should go home." "All right. I will be back tomorrow." "All right." She walked down the porch steps. She did not look back at the door, but she lifted her hand without turning. He stood at the screen and watched her get into her car. He stood there until her taillights had gone past the bend in the road, and the sound of the engine had been lost in the marsh. Inside, the kitchen light was still on. He turned it off. He stood in the dark for a moment with his hand on the switch. He could hear Hattie breathing in the back bedroom. He could hear the tide coming in. He had not known, 4 years ago, that there was a version of his life on the other side of the one he was living. He had not allowed himself to imagine one. Tonight, for the first time, he could see it. He went to bed. 6 weeks later, the last Saturday in November. Charleston in a warm spell, light north wind, sky the color of a clean shell. Royce Stannard had resigned from the board 2 weeks earlier. The civil case had been filed and was moving through the discovery phase. The Marquardt bid had been formally withdrawn. Pemberton had been named interim chairman. The design division of Easterbrook & Company would reopen in February under Owen Trask, design director, 25 hours a week with a clause for school pickup. Hattie had started in the Cooper River Youth Sailing Program. Marlowe had filled out the registration 2 weeks earlier without being asked. That morning, Halcyon went back in the water. It was a small ceremony. No press. The yard crew, Calder, Hattie, Owen, Marlowe. Owen handed Hattie the chalk for the keel marking. It was a tradition Henry had taught him 12 years ago. The designer marked the hull with one small word before the launch. Hattie sat down on the ground beside the keel and wrote her name in small, careful letters on the underside, in a spot only she would know about. She wrote, "Hattie was here." Owen looked at it. He did not erase it. He stood up and offered her his hand, and she took it. They launched. Halcyon went in the water clean. The hull line was still perfect. Calder had been right 12 years ago. It was the most beautiful one Henry had ever signed off on. Owen took the helm. Marlowe stood beside him. Hattie sat amidships with her hands flat on her own knees, looking out at the harbor. They sailed past the battery and into the open water of the harbor. The wind held steady. The sails were full. Hattie did not look at either of them. She looked at Fort Sumter and at the far end of Sullivan's Island and at a brown pelican that crossed the bow at deck height. "Dad?" she said. "Yes." "Is Marlowe going to come sailing with us again?" Owen did not look at Marlowe. He kept his hand on the helm and his eye on the leeward telltale. "I was hoping she would," he said. Marlowe was looking out at Sullivan's Island. She did not turn her head. She smiled. Small, the kind of smile a person smiles when they have heard exactly what they were waiting to hear. "I will," she said. Hattie nodded once and went back to watching the pelican. The line from the night of the gala, they did not say it again. None of the three of them needed to. The answer had been given a month earlier on a back porch in Mount Pleasant, and it had been given again now in the smaller voice of a child who had heard everything she needed to. Halcyon turned out toward the open water. The sun came higher over the harbor. The yard behind them was already small. They did not need to say where they were going. They did not need to say when they would turn back. The wind was good. The boat was sound. Owen had his hand on the helm of a hull he had drawn at 27. A woman he had not allowed himself to want stood beside him. A daughter he had carried alone for 4 years sat at his feet. He had not, 4 years ago, thought a day like this was possible. It was possible. The bow held its line.